Hello, everyone. This is Ed McGill, co-founder and partner of McGill-Junge Wealth Management. Today, I'm with my good friend and director of investments here at MJWM, Jason Kirchhoff. So welcome, Jason. And we're going to be doing another quarterly commentary today on July 8th, 2025. And because of everything we have going on in the world, the country, everywhere, we've brought Frank Kelly in as a guest expert on our quarterly commentary. So we're getting a little bonus Frank here today. So welcome both of you and thanks for joining me.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks for having us.
Okay, Jason, I'm looking at your article that's going to be dropping this week on our website and to all the subscribers. So make sure if you're a McGill-Junge client or friend that you are subscribing to Jason's quarterly commentary. And it's titled, I actually have to look at it because it's a little longer this time. It ain't what you don't know that gets you into trouble. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. And that was from Mark Twain, actually. So, Jason, tell us, what does that headline mean and what are you talking about?
One of the questions we ask portfolio managers when we're interviewing them and doing our due diligence is, what keeps you up at night? A lot of times the answer can be interesting, but most of all, it's about understanding their thought process on risk management, right? Do they have an idea of what those big structural risks are in their portfolio and how do they mitigate those risks or think about them? So in this quarterly commentary, we kind of turned it around and asked ourselves, what keeps us up at night? And you'd probably be surprised.
So what keeps us up at night?
Yeah, exactly. From a portfolio construction standpoint, where are we vulnerable? What kind of events could happen that would be things that are kind of out of the blue or the unknown unknowns?
Yep.
And we do have a way to kind of triage these kind of bigger events, and it's kind of asking ourselves kind of three questions. Can we predict it? Is it something we can predict in advance? And that's very difficult. Frank probably has a better track record than we would on a lot of these events. And in fact, I was just looking at if you go back to the Israel's incursion into Iran, the Pentagon Pizza Tracker. Are you familiar with this, Frank? There's a Twitter feed that looks at the pizza places around the Pentagon, and if they're busy, it's implied that something big's about to happen. So maybe you can predict some of these things. But the second question is, can you then predict what the market response will be to that event? And that's also pretty difficult. And I think using another recent event, if you look at when the U.S. got involved with the 14 bunker buster bombs over the weekend, and you would have thought, okay, I should probably go long oil, I should go long the U.S. dollar and short stocks. And unfortunately, all of those would have been wrong the next day, right? The market kind of looked through that, a lot of that potentially priced in. So it's, can you predict it? Even if you can predict it, can you predict what the market will do because of that event? And then finally, will this have a meaningful impact on long-term portfolios and how they compound? Because a lot of this stuff will correct itself in a very short period of time. So when we think about what keeps us up at night, it's more of these kind of structural changes in markets. And the one I highlight in the quarterly commentary piece is the rise of passive investing. So it's been
That's been huge. I mean, a tremendous amount of new dollars, articles being written about just by the indexes.
Exactly. And it's worked. It's been a great boon for investors because it's cheap and it's very tax efficient and it's pretty easy. And we use indices as well. But now we're close to, depending on who you listen to, probably 50 to 60% of the US large cap market is passive market cap weighted investing. And there's starting to be more kind of articles from the academics as well as regulatory bodies talking about what kind of impact could that have on investing. And a lot of it revolves around, you would likely see more concentration as the large companies get more money, the larger get larger. The market cap weighted investing is very price insensitive. It doesn't care about the fundamentals or the valuations. It just buys the largest companies in proportion to the money that goes in. And it does that every 2 weeks as 401k money comes in, most of it passive. It just keeps buying those larger companies. So potentially could lead to concentration, which is what we've seen. Now the largest 10 largest stocks in the S&P are roughly 40% of the market. It could lead to higher volatility. It could also have some impact on just the diversification within the fund, and that kind of goes along with concentration. So that's something we are spending some time on from I wouldn't say it keeps us up at night. It makes me tighten the shoulders would probably be a better term. But that's kind of the structural things we're trying to look at and say, oh, is this something that could potentially change how portfolios compound over time going forward?
Well, Jason, I've noticed we've always believed in a passive active plus strategy, which is having a foundational piece of passive management and then strategically adding active managers when we feel that net of fees that and taxes and costs that they can provide value. And then the plus is, where do alternatives fit, things that aren't tied to the normal, stock and bond public markets and too. So tell our listeners about some of the maybe strategic plays where active management has benefited our clients' portfolios, not only, this year, but in the past as well too.
Yeah, so with that concentration and in passive market cap weighted, a lot of the industries that used to make up a larger part of the index are now very small. And I think a good example there would be natural resource companies, right? They were kind of left for dead. They were a very small part of the S&P 500, 2% or so, when historically they were closer to 20, 25. So that's an area where we looked for an active manager that knew the supply and demand of some of those underlying commodities, whether it's uranium or platinum, natural gas, oil, and could kind of go into those different companies and understand the valuation metrics. And obviously that costs more than just buying a passive index in natural resources, but that's an area where we think it's well worth it, net of fees, to find a manager that specializes in that space and knows it well.
Well, and that's also a great example of our team doing the research, you spending multiple calls, with the manager, with Justin and Carson and yourself, and then bringing in Ross and Scott as well too. And that has been a tremendous additive, this year to our clients' portfolios. So great job on that. Last piece I'd ask you, because of our size, is it regular and common now that we can just call the managers themselves and actually talk to them directly versus, some other firms maybe having to rely on the wholesalers, that with the scale now, we're going directly to the source. Is that correct?
Yeah, I would say that's correct for most of the managers. We're kind of in that sweet spot where we're large enough that we get access to the portfolio management team, but not so large that we're going to swamp them and overwhelm them from an asset standpoint. So that is kind of working in our favor right now.
That is awesome. Now, you mentioned the pizza tracker, and for those of you who don't know, Frank is one of the big believers in, it wasn't Ozempic, it was Moderna that you were on. And so I'm wondering if the pizza tracker changed as you went on some of those medications. Is that affecting the DC pizza tracker, Frank?
It affects me because I'm not eating as much pizza. So yes, and the amount of pizza that I consumed, it must have impacted the greater Washington D.C. pizza industry. The entire sector's been hurt. Yes, I'm sorry for that, but I feel much better.
You do feel better. You look awesome, and that's great. Man, since the last time we've talked, so many things going on, and we do get questions from our clients on a number of these different topics. But, maybe we just start there. What's keeping you up at night right now, Frank, or what's the scuttlebutt in Washington? Because there's been a ton of stuff that has happened in really the past, month, or less than a month.
For all of your clients, you should know what keeps me up at night is you, Ed, calling me in the middle of the night asking, Trump just bombed Iran. What does this mean? We got to work this out. I mean, you are on these issues. No, seriously, what does keep me up at night are things like Iran. I mean, that was a fascinating move by Trump, right? We have gotten used to presidents that, whether it was Afghanistan or Iraq or, he went in, surgically hit them, pulled out again, which left markets guessing what was going to happen, right? And I think it shocked every other country, particularly the Iranians. Wait a minute, you're done, and now you want to have a peace talk.
Peace talk, yeah.
And it's like, hey, you know what? I'll hit you again if you're not going to sit down and start talking. It's kind of a parent-child, I'll put you back in timeout unless you start behaving back. So Iran does keep me up at night, but it is interesting to see, and Jason alluded to this, oil prices really didn't blow up. Iran actually has had a record year of oil production. And it goes to show that the markets have become so important in geopolitics. The markets are actually the nuclear bomb now, right? If you disrupt the markets, that's where people really are going to freak out. And you really want to go that far to disrupt the markets. And why the Israelis didn't bomb the oil and gas fields or the shipping facilities where they were, loading oil and gas. The Straits of Hormuz, as the Iranians didn't close that down like people thought that. So again, the markets are the really powerful player here. But Iran does worry me because this isn't over yet, and the Iranians aren't giving up. And we got to see where Russia plays into this. The Russians are very allied. They didn't do anything for them this time, but that may change. So I'm keeping my eye on Iran.
Now that's interesting, and then still have the conflict when you mentioned Russia and Ukraine on Monday, which was yesterday. We had a new round of tariffs. Some of the talks maybe weren't going as fast. You had Scott Besson on a couple of the weekend shows. Let's first start with the tariffs, because that does shock the market. Yesterday we had a pretty decent drop. Again, a temporary decline. The markets will rebound. It's a series of these temporary declines followed historically by permanent increases. But what are you hearing on the tariffs and the trade deals?
So first, I'll say this about President Trump: whether you love him or hate him, and there seems to be no middle ground. But people have to remember was the CEO of a large privately held corporation, and as a president, that's how he acts more than anything else. He is the decider. Everybody is a staffer who works for him, his cabinet, etc. And on the tariff side, I think if there's one person that he really trusts and has grown to trust, it's Scott Besson. And Besson has a particular way with him that he's assuring yet highly respectful of the president. So on the tariff side, I think this was Trump showing flexibility, negotiating flexibility, as if he was negotiating the leasing of an apartment or a casino or any property. I'll give you guys until August, right? But let me tell you, some of these other countries I'm going to hit, like Japan and South Korea, because they're not playing along, they're not coming forward. So I think that's, from a market perspective, they don't understand this. We've never seen trade talks like this ever. Trade talks
and that much out in the public too.
Yeah, and trade talks are usually so boring.
Yeah.
Right? It's like reading the user's instructions for your computer. It's like, do I have to read the manual? Really? No, this is not how he works. And the definition of a trade deal for Trump is not the classic micro, this is, percentage of this. No, it's like you're going to stop putting tariffs on us, on our goods, and compete more, or maybe what it really can be is foreign direct investment in the United States. And this is something that markets aren't paying attention to. Trump has gotten so far in his first 6 months almost $11 trillion of foreign direct investment commitments so far. It's $11 trillion of that is, as these things come in, foreign countries and companies committing to that is incredible economic tailwinds coming over the next 4-6 years. So I predict he's going to get a lot more of that, and he prefers that. And the last thing I'd say, there is a flip side to him extending the tariffs. It's the revenue that's coming in. This isn't hurting the U.S. per se. It hasn't shown up in inflation so far. And all of that revenue is being used to pay down the cost of the one big beautiful bill that he's just gotten passed, and the deficit overall. So for him, it's not a loser to keep these things going.
It's interesting, and you mentioned the big beautiful bill where now our team's putting together what's this mean from a tax standpoint. There's a lot of things in there, from estate taxes to or making permanent the tax cuts previously, which go really up and down the tax code. But if you listen to Mike Johnson recently, the speaker, who of anyone that's really elevated himself just as a politician, man, he has thread some needles. You think about how good Nancy Pelosi was as the speaker and controlling a party, and whether you agreed with her or not, it was very impressive, that she, wielded that that big stick. And Mike does it differently. But when you think of the big beautiful bill, if you listen to him, there's other ones coming, and knowing Trump, it'll be the really big beautiful bill, and then the really really big beautiful bill. So talk about in the last 30 seconds minute here, reconciliation and what's coming in the fall and then the spring of next year.
See, and to your clients who are listening, this is where Ed is on top of it, and this is what he calls me about in the middle of the night, and that's what keeps me up. No, the markets have not paid attention to this, but Ed gets this. And listen, the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, has said now twice in the last 3 weeks on national television, this is not the only reconciliation bill we're going to pass. Now, that's what the one big beautiful bill is. Reconciliation, just as a quick reminder, you can't filibuster it, so it's a gimme putt for Republicans to get passed. They just need a simple majority in the Senate and the House. But reconciliation bills can only include things that deal with budget, taxes, or the deficit. Can't be. Right. Johnson is going to introduce, as he said, another reconciliation bill, another big, beautiful bill in October. And this third one, he's already planning for spring of 2026. So I would be careful here. Your team is doing exactly what they should be doing, and they're great at it in terms of planning and what all the taxes mean. There could be more tweaks to the tax code in October, because they may say, well, this was working, it's not really working, let's tweak this, let's improve it. State and local tax type things, so watch for that. There's going to be more, and I predict they're going to use the 2026 budget as the core of that October reconciliation bill, and what they're going to do is cut. So the whole idea of DOGE that sort of came in as sort of the shock troops, right, just cleaving. Now the surgeons are coming in, and they are doing the deep tissue surgery here, and they're going to be more cuts and more cuts and more cuts. So the deficit, watch for the deficit to get cut, and I think this is going to shock people, and tie back in the tariffs. One key piece of tariffs, Trump has got a baseline 10% tariffs. He's not taking those away, even with a trade deal. So that's constant more revenue. So Trump doesn't talk about it, but he's much more focused on deficit reduction, which has such an impact on treasuries, as a legacy issue for him than anybody understands.
That's interesting. And Jason, we'll end with you because, we just talked about a lot of things happening, and I know you're talking to the fund managers directly. We love all your research. You're always writing papers, reading, and coming to the team with just thoughts. But you said such a great point as before we got on to the team. You said a lot of this, though, is just really noise. Tell us what you mean with that. Let's end strong on there for the clients, and then I'll finish this up.
Well, it's not easy to ignore sometimes some of these really large front page type events, but if you have an appreciation for history and you look at some of these large events and then you look at market reaction, if there is a market reaction, it usually self-corrects in a pretty short amount of time. So we'll try and keep looking at those big picture structural issues, things that we think are true that maybe aren't true going forward, and keep our focus on those things.
Yeah, and ultimately our whole team with all of our clients, we're focusing on that comprehensive plan, and then what other strategies are we putting in place just to help insulate the plan, and especially for our clients that are heading into retirement distribution already there, insulate the plan against some of that short-term market volatility. So there's all kinds of different things that we're doing, as a firm. So I want our clients to sleep well at night. We're spending our time reading, talking, calling Frank and everything else. And Jason, I love your leadership. You're such a great mentor to so many on the team and leading our investment department. And Frank, always a pleasure talking to you. Keep us posted on what's going on in DC, and keep your ringer on. I'll be calling here soon.
I know, Ed. I love it. Part of the family.
Appreciate it. Have a great day, everyone. This is Ed McGill, co-founder and partner of McGill-Junge Wealth Management, signing off, and have a great day.